you are there, you are a little late.
Right.
See, once you have the animals scouring, and I have people at home saying, well, maybe they're having too much water, they're drinking too much, so they're going to cut the water from them, the water supply. Oh man, that's good. If you have the same situation and you don't drink any water, think about you having scours and not even being able to drink water. The dehydration is going to end up killing everybody. So don't think that you have to cut the water because they're drinking too much from the grass, because they're two different things. They have an imbalance.
Dry matter is hay,
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. What kind of hay? We will go back to that tomorrow. So I went off the the trail here, but I think that makes a little bit of sense when we start talking about all these things about tenderness and fatness and how to get to this desirable finishing. The only thing we have in hand to measure what we're doing is weighing, is to have an estimate of the animal gains. Gains are a relative indicator of performance, because you may say, yeah, 2 pounds a day, maybe something that would put gains and fattening in this 3-4 frame score animals, but maybe not, may not be enough for a 6 frame animal, frame 6 animal. Yes, you're right. Gains are not the best estimator of fattening, but what else do we have in hand to do this practically and in a cheap or not too expensive way? We could ultrasound the animals, but we don't want to ultrasound them all the time, and we don't want to be ultrasounding every 20 days or every 30 days to look at the degree of fatness. And if you have 300-400 animals, it's not feasible to ultrasound each one of them on a monthly basis. But you can weigh. And what we have learned at home is that at least if you gain, I would say, above 1.5 pounds a day with this medium frame type of animals, most likely you are not just laying growth and muscle and bone, but fat. You're gaining some intramuscular fat and back fat also. So at least 1.5 pounds should be the target to it's not just growing the animal, but laying some fat. If you ask me, my target is 2 pounds a day in my head. 2 pounds a day, I target for that. If you could be above that, great. 3 pounds a day, better. On grass, you will never be over fattening, and like I said. There are people that have measured on green corn, grazing sorghums or grazing green corn, they have measured 4 pounds a day, but for 15 days, maybe less than a month. I want 2 pounds a day, 3 months in the year. So more consistent and even gain at the end. So we're going to go back to that over and over. Let's continue on here. What did we do here? Did we? Okay. Do you have any batteries for this? Got scared. What we did here is we went ahead and had a pasture treatment here, controlled treatment here, and then we feedlot finished these animals on 100% hay diet and a 40% hay. And again, we were looking at comparing the performance over 100 days. These animals here were gained faster on this high concentrate ration. Seems to be working a little bit. Thank you. I'll change in a minute. But when we look at the size of the carcasses and the ribeye, the length and width of these muscles, they're not extremely different. So what I'm trying to say here is that if you have a performance on your pasture-based animals that it's not too bad, they're performing well, I wouldn't expect much smaller animals or little animals because we hurt them. We're not really hurting them if we're feeding them well, and growth will happen normally. Does it make any sense? So we don't need to put the animal on a feedlot to have a normal growth and size. We are not creating dwarfs here. We're not creating small animals. We are developing or growing animals that grow normally on pasture, and we'll actually be fattening on pasture on their genetics. It's going to be just what the genetics are allowing them to do. Of course, we can always feed them for a little longer and get them bigger. We're always dealing with growing animals here, where they're not adults. But what we find here is we won't have differences in sizes if we have a steady program, a fair program that would provide us with acceptable gains. If I hurt them from the beginning, if I'm put them through a long restriction from after weaning, then yes, I may hurt them, and off a pasture I may not have the time to really gain that growth back and compensate. So the compensatory effects that we sometimes get in a feed yard, we may not get off of these pasture finishing programs. Does that make any sense? Okay. And as long as we have enough fair rates of gain here at the beginning, look at the water holding capacity, the same, very similar. These are estimates of shear force or tenderness. Not much difference. What we have here with these letters have to do with the color. Pasture-fed beef tends to be slightly reddish. This tells me that this here, however, was a little shinier. But looking at these numbers here, 35, 36, they're not extremely different. This 12 says that this fat here, actually, if you look at this number, is less yellow than this fat here. And these were pen-fed, and these were actually pen-fed, also pen-finished on a 40% hay diet. So is pasture-fed beef always more yellow or yellower? Not necessarily. Depending on where you are, the diet, and many other circumstances could create more or less yellow. So in this study, for example, where they were slaughtered light, the animals were the muscles, that muscle was even wider. The fat was lighter in this grass-fed compared to the grain-fed. So there is no, a distinct difference there. And we have also found the reverse in some other studies, of course. But can you tell, just looking at the steaks, see if I have any steak here? I'm going to have some later on, but let me go see if I can find them. Okay, before I get there, what I'm trying to show you is that creamy, white-looking look of that fat is so difficult to separate by the eye that you have to do it with a machine. We do it with a objective test with a machine that looks at reflectance, and then you can tell the steaks apart. Otherwise, they look so much alike. And this study, what we did, we backgrounded the animals on hay, 40% hay diet, 70% hay, or 100% alfalfa hay, and then they went to a pasture to be finished. See, we're in the upside down world here. Down there we do the reverse because we are crazy, I guess. I had this reviewer. I sent this article to these people, and they said, "This interesting article, and we may publish it." And he says, "It's not because there is anything new, but you're doing it the opposite way. Did you try the real way?" And they have a point. Yeah. Who would background animals in a confinement situation then to put them on pasture? Well, many of us do that. Why? Because winters are always a problem in many of these parts of the world. And if you are weaning your steer or you find your calves in fall and you have nowhere to go with them because you have no winter annuals, no pastures that look green or nice or whatever. You have snow. What else do you have left? Silage, hay, and you background them on that. And then when you have a spring and grasses in spring, and you can bring them out to your pastures to fatten or finish. So that wasn't a crazy idea. That's something that some people would do. So what did we do here? We put animals through that situation, and then we finished them on alfalfa pastures and some annual green leaf corn. These were the hot carcass weights. And we had these guys here as a comparison, always on pasture. They had winter annuals during winter time. 40% hay and during the backgrounding, and then finishing on pasture, had a similar back fat thickness as the pasture ones. These guys here that were backgrounded on 70% hay or 100 hay, they were much leaner. The finishing was not as good. So again, these were wintered on this diet and then finished on the same pasture as these ones were. Look at intramuscular fat, 3.302 here. So if pastures are fair, yeah, good, you are going to get to the 3% intramuscular fat. If you're not there, if you're 2% or below, or 2% like here, something may not be right. I mean, if you have the potential, if you have the pastures, you have to be able to put some fat in your animals. Look at the shear force. No differences here. They went through this situation, and this guy's here through pasture. So this is, in our part of the world, this is more expensive. We're feeding more hay or silage, whatever. But it's more predictable if winters are a problem. And here we have a straight 100% pasture, easier but less predictable. From this standpoint, no differences on the physical attributes. However, a cooking loss, you see here it's a higher loss. That is moisture during cooking, because when we have less fat, extra lean or too lean beef, the cooking process dries that meat a little more. So we lose more water. So some of these attributes of this grass-fed beef or desirable traits is that are associated to that little amount of fat that prevents the cut or the meat from losing the moisture and becoming a dry steak or a dry piece of meat. So there we have a little problem. This was the beginning. After this backgrounding period, we killed control animals, and they were 6 months, 7 months younger than here. Look at the shear forces. They actually were similar or even higher than here. Yeah, but now I'm all confused, you may say, because you told me that they're going to get tougher as they get older. And now you're showing me that maybe 6 months older, they're not as tough, or they're actually slightly more tender than when they're younger. So that age issue is something to keep in mind, but we don't want to overdo that. We don't want to be killing animals lean and young, because otherwise they're going to get tougher. Because we have a window, we have a period of time there that they're going to be pretty much the same, and maybe a little bit less, a little more fat, more intramuscular fat, a little more water holding capacity will help to reduce that, to wash the age, to wash the increase in age of the animal. You see what I'm trying to say? They get older, they gain a little more fat. They're not yet developing a tremendous amount of connective tissue. So that age may not be that important, that extra 6 months or 7 months. Again, here we're talking about animals that are below 2 years of age, so they're young. Okay? Look at the fat here. The intramuscular fat is lower than this. So it is helping us to protect that meat. It cuts well anyway, and so we don't have to rush to kill everything very, very young. And we can pull other things from there, but what else is here? Again, the lipid content at slaughter. These were too low, too extra lean, and the rest of them. See, these guys here backgrounded on a 100% hay. The hay was quality-wise a little bit all over the place. Gains were pretty low. They were always a bit behind in their lipid content in that muscle. We have a little problem here, however, when we look at these lipid profiles. So from a physical standpoint, tenderness-wise, color, things look the same when we did some backgrounding on something that wasn't pasture. Okay? We backgrounded them on something else that wasn't green pasture. Things compensated at the end. They all look pretty much the same, except that one that had a 100% hay during 6-7 months and didn't give us a minimum amount of fat. That was the story until this moment, right? Now we're looking at the lipid profiles. Let's go to the omega-6, omega-3 ratio here. These ones that had the backgrounding with a little more concentrate in them, although they were finished. Excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong, this one right here. Oh, yeah, excuse me, go back. They were growing and we slaughtered them, that intermediate slaughter after the confinement feeding. These guys had 60% concentrate. What do we expect on an omega-6, omega-3 ratio? The highest ratio, of course. They were very light, young animals, but they had a little more concentrate here, a little more grain. These guys here had no grain. They had a protein supplement, and this had all alfalfa hay, and then these were pastures. These guys here had the highest ratio, and they all went well down until the green growing pasture gave us the best ratio. These guys here had hay, but it wasn't pasture available for them, so the ratio wasn't as good as this. Now, when they were finished on that during the pasture phase, the ratio improved more than anything for this one right here. But still, after, I don't remember how many days, but 120 days, 114 days on pasture, we still had this residual effect of that backgrounding in a confinement situation with grain that gave us a slightly higher omega-3, omega-6, omega-3 ratio than compared to this one that had no access to a concentrate during the backgrounding period. Am I losing you with this? Yes, sir.
What would the concentrate
This right here? What was that, the concentrate?
So, yeah, what type of...
This was a 40% hay, ground hay. It had here, and the 60% concentrate was ground corn, sunflower meal, which is like a soybean meal, and the mineral premix. So again, could we, with 150 days, 2 months, 4 months of grazing, wash the history, wash the backgrounding? Maybe so for backgroundings that were on high fiber, high content of hay or high silage, but not so much for this backgroundings on concentrates. And we're talking here not 90% concentrate, we're talking 60%. So if we had kept the animals longer, maybe 250 days would have done that, would have washed that off. That history of pen feeding, I know that from another study that doesn't wash off.